Give it up from the West. Where's Seattle? There's some. And when we were just talking, I lamented a little bit, and I said, what's it like being in the House right now? And she said, I've been a minority, and I've been in the minority figuratively and literally all my life. And so I'm ready to fight. And she's working with the DNC. She's working with Tom Perez. Tom's asked her to really play a role in helping us build the party and figure out how we make our tent truly big enough, progressive enough, and broad enough for all of the issues and the personalities and the stories that we all care about. And so we feel very, very fortunate to have the Congresswoman here to share with us about her story and how she's working with the DNC to rebuild the party. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Jayapal.
Good afternoon, Detroit and Arena Summit. How are you guys doing? No, that's not good enough. I'm sorry. I heard you were out late partying, but really, we are ready to take on this movement. So how are you all doing? Now we're talking. We can't let a little partying get in the way of really being enthusiastic about what matters. So thank you all so much for having me today. I'm really thrilled to be here. My name's Pramila Jayapal. Proud, honored to represent the 7th Congressional District. Where's my Seattle people? And also very proud to be the first Indian American woman in the House of Representatives. And the first woman to represent the 7th District. And how about the first person of color in the Washington Democratic delegation to Congress? And really what I wanted to do today, because I know that there are organizers here, there are people who want to run for office. How many of you are thinking about running for office? All right, that is awesome. And there are people who are just ready to make a difference given the moment that we're in. And people ask me how I like this job, and let me tell you, it is an amazing job. It is truly an honor to represent 750,000 people, and everyone says that they represent the best district in the country, but I actually do represent the best district in the country. That is amazing. There's only 11,000 people who have served in Congress in the entire history of the country. And if you think about women or you think about people of color, it really comes down to a tiny fraction. So every morning I wake up and I think about the fact that not only is that an honor, but serving at this moment in our country's history is an incredible honor. And it is necessary. It is a momentous time, and it requires that we wake up every day and think about how we organize and think about how we take back our country and make sure that it really stands for the values that allowed me to go from being an immigrant who came here when I was 16 years old by myself to being a United States Congress member. But really, I want to start with that because I think the personal stories are really important, and I believe that our resistance, our mountain of resistance, is built one story at a time. So let me tell you my story, and that is that I am an immigrant from India. I was born in India. I came to the United States when I was 16 years old by myself. My parents had about $5,000 in their bank account. They used the whole thing to send me here by myself, a sacrifice I didn't fully appreciate until my son turned 16. And then I was like, oh my God, really? You sent me across the ocean by myself, knowing that I might never come back? And because of our broken immigration system, and I know you just had a panel on immigration, but because of our broken immigration system, I've never been able to bring my parents here. So they live in India, I live here, and that sacrifice and that opportunity that I got to come here by myself is really why I've spent the rest of my life dedicated to opportunity for others as an immigrant, human, and civil rights activist, long before I got into politics. So when I came here, I went to Georgetown University. We have some Hoyas in the room? All right, excellent. We're going to have to sing Hoya, Hoya, Saxa, because I still know the song. But I went to Georgetown University, and because we had no money, I got one phone call home a year. And I used to use, so my sophomore year of college, I should tell you, my dad wanted me to be 3 professions. If you take all of your money and you use it to send your kid to the United States, Only 3 professions that are acceptable. Tell me what they are. You know what they are. Doctor, lawyer, engineer. You got it. 3 things. That's it. That's it. So you can imagine, I was supposed to be an economics major. My sophomore year of college, I used my one phone call from the dorm phone at Georgetown University. It had a cord on it. There was no other way to call back then. And I used my one call to call my father and tell him that I was going to be an English literature major. And then I held the phone away from my ear like this as he screamed at me and said, "I didn't send you to the United States to learn how to speak English. You already know how to speak English." So I promised him that I would get the same job with an economics degree, with an English degree that I would have gotten with an economics degree. I went to work on Wall Street in the mid-1980s. I worked at an investment bank, Payne Weber, it no longer exists. I did leverage buyouts, and I learned so much about why our financial system is totally screwed up. And it really was an amazing opportunity for me because a lot of people look at me even now and think, oh, she's, a social justice person, human rights person. She doesn't know anything about numbers. So I'm just going to lecture to her about economics, and then I can find the mistake in their spreadsheet in 2 minutes. And it's been really... You'll learn that it's good to be underestimated sometimes. It's actually a real tool in your pocket. So I did that for a couple of years and realized I didn't want to do it. I went on to get my master's of business, and while I was at business school in Chicago, I realized that I really wanted to use my business skills to do something that made a difference in the world, and so I started I had a mentor, Mary Houghton at the South Shore Bank, who taught me that you could use business skills for economic development purposes. Started working in the south side of Chicago, doing economic development. There we go. And then went on to, when all of my friends were going back to Wall Street or, doing management consulting work, I went to work along the borders of Laos and Cambodia and Thailand, counting chickens and figuring out how rural economies worked. You can imagine my dad at that point. And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I came back to the United States, finished my MBA, and then went to work for a medical equipment company. I was lost. I was trying to figure out where is the thing that's really going to drive me. And I've always believed that vocation and avocation should be the same thing, if possible. Not everybody has that luxury. But if possible, that's what I wanted to try to get to. And so I came back. I worked for a medical equipment company selling defibrillators. Believe it or not, my territory was Western Ohio and Eastern Indiana. I drove a little Ford Aerostar van, not so little actually, a big Ford Aerostar van, and I had this cart in the back that I would pull out, and the legs would come out from under, and it had defibrillators on it, and I would go into hospitals and volunteer fire departments, and I was the first woman and the first person of color to be in the sales in that area. And I would sell defibrillators. And today, I think it was one of the best experiences to prepare me for politics in a very odd way. Had no idea of that at the time, but I was working with people that had very, very different political beliefs than me, and I was working in rural America. And that was a part that I really didn't know at all. And so I had to stay long enough to show all the guys that I could outsell them because none of them thought that I could. And I really had an amazing experience. I would walk into these little volunteer firefighter departments, and the guys would look at me and say, "So where are you from?" And I would say, "India." And they'd say, "Where in Indiana?" And I'd say, no, India, that continent. We ended up becoming very good friends. I sold a lot of defibrillators. You want to be with me if you're going to have a heart attack, because I know how to use those things. But it was a formative experience, and it also was the thing that said, okay, I got to go into the nonprofit world. I went and worked then for a global health and development organization in Washington State called PATH. I did expansion of services for reproductive rights and women's health and family health around the world. Went to India and lived in villages for a couple of years, and then came back, and it was 2001, and the attacks of 9/11 happened. And I did not think I was going to start an organization. I was working for justice on an international level, but I wouldn't say that I was an organizer at the time. But when 9/11 happened, there are these moments in time, and some of you are feeling it for the first time, perhaps with this election, where you just say, I cannot sit back anymore. I have to stand up. I have to fight for what I believe in. And at that time, there were hate crimes happening against Arabs, Muslims, and South Asians. And then very shortly after that, the Bush administration started secretly detaining and deporting people. There were civil liberties abuses. It's hard to remember this now because in retrospect, compared to what we're going through now, that seems almost better. And it's hard to imagine that. But I ended up starting an organization. We sued the Bush administration, something that nobody thought was possible. We won. We stopped the deportations of 4,000 people across the country. And started to realize that we could organize a whole bunch of voices that were not at the table. Folks of color, immigrants, allies who believed that we really are a country that should stand up for everybody regardless of what you look like or what your religion is. And so we started building a movement. And that organization I ran it for 12 years and turned it into the largest immigrant advocacy organization in Washington State, one of the largest in the country. And in order to do that, not only to fight for the DREAM Act, which we passed in Washington State, not only to fight for the 2013 Senate Immigration Reform Bill that we passed in the Senate with 67 bipartisan votes. John Boehner wouldn't bring it to the floor in the House, but we got it done in the Senate, and we would have gotten it done if it had been brought to the floor. But not only did I work on immigration issues, but realized that I am not a woman on Monday, an immigrant on Tuesday, a worker on Wednesday, and a mom on Thursday. I'm all of those things all of the time, and our progressive platform has to address racial justice, economic justice, and gender justice. And so we started working on LGBTQ issues. Could I get some water? Thank you. We started working on LGBTQ issues. We worked on the $15 minimum wage. I'm so proud to have been on the committee that passed 15 in the city of Seattle. We passed marriage equality in our state. And, do I not get a clap for that? And we worked on critical issues around voting rights. We registered 23,000 new immigrant citizens to vote in the state of Washington. We passed a ban the box legislation so that we could get African Americans back in. And we built the most amazing coalitions for progressive change where we had to fight with each other sometimes. We had to call each other out sometimes. We had to say, you know what? You don't get to stand for that and not this, or we need to bring you along. But it was amazing, and I really do believe that we have some of the best progressive coalitions in the country in Washington State, and it was a real pleasure. So why did I run for office? I never thought I would. I was always on the outside. I've been arrested 3 times in civil disobedience. I've led some of the largest protests in the country, but I really felt like it was important to actually get into the arena, as we say here. And that's because I looked around and realized that we had spent all this time trying to get elected officials to do the things that we felt needed to happen, but there were too few people that actually came from our communities that understood our experiences. We were not represented as women, as people of color, as immigrants. So I ran for the state Senate, became the first South Asian American ever elected to the state legislature, served there for 2 years, and then ran for Congress, and here I am. But the reason that I believe that this moment is so important is because if you look at what happened in the election, and there's lots of things we could say about it, but I will tell you, I don't think it was just about an economic issue versus social issues. That's not what the election was about. We need to get more people engaged. We need to get more candidates who represent and really speak to people. And there's lots of things we need to do around structure and rebuilding of trust within the Democratic Party, but we need to organize. And if you look at the times we've been successful in the last 5 months, because it gets depressing, right? You wake up every morning, I feel like I have whiplash from one scandal to the next, but when we've been successful, it has been because people have stood up and made it happen. So the reason that we were able to beat the first healthcare vote, and they couldn't get enough votes and they had to pull it from the floor, is because you, people across the country, Indivisible, I hear is in the room, Flippable, all of the organizations that have been part of making this happen and bringing people to the table to recognize that politics is not something that is out there. Politics is about our lives. It's about the roads we drive on. It's about the schools we go to. It's about the water we drink in Flint, Michigan. It's about our ability to actually live a life with dignity and justice and respect for all of us. And it's based on this very simple principle that I've lived by my whole life, which is we're all better off when we're all better off. And that's what we need to fight for. So I'll end by telling you that this is an amazing moment for us, and it's the opportunity for us to really make a difference by getting engaged. And for some of you that are thinking about running for office, and particularly, let me give a shout out to the women, and even more specifically to the women of color. You know, women have to be asked 7 times to run for office, compared to a man being asked once. And we love you guys, but you just have a little more confidence, unfortunately sometimes, than, not the guys in this room, I'm sure, but so to the women out there, let me say this to you. Consider this the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth times that you're being asked to run for office, and let's get on it, all right? Let's go get on it. There's a lot that we can do, and it's not going to be easy. I'm not going to lie. It's a really difficult climate right now. And there are a lot of things happening that can have us be distracted. But let's remember that the core of this is how many of us are engaged? What are we doing every day to try to engage others? How do we build the organizing movement that actually allows for people to come out and connect government with people? Because this is not something that is far away. We represent you. And you get to call for us to be accountable. And that's why I held 5 town halls in my district, by the way. I'm not afraid of my constituents. But we fundamentally have this opportunity to fight for the country that we all know is possible. Not the country we have today, but the country that is about bending that moral arc of the universe towards justice more quickly than we are going right now. The country that allowed for somebody like me to come here, or for all of you to go through the challenges that you have, but to still have hope that you can fight for a better future, and that you can fight for racial, economic, and social justice and gender justice all together. So thank you all so much for being here, and I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you. We're gonna take 2 questions. We're gonna take 2 questions. We got some mic runners. We got Ash. We got 1 question over here on the right.
I commend you for all of the different issues you addressed that you all have been able to pass. I guess my question and my hesitancy is, how are you being in the public life with your whole life being transparent? That's the part that I'm always curious about. Everything you do is in the spotlight and you're dissected constantly.
It's true. It's not easy, and you have to kind of give up the notion of privacy completely, because you're a public elected official. And there are some people who draw very firm boundaries, but I'm an organizer, and so I actually believe that talking to people is the best way to get people engaged. So my job is 24/7, and it's hard for me, even when we go out to dinner, just my son and I, or my husband and I, to just sort of not have tons of people coming up and wanting to talk, because it feels important to engage each other at this moment. Maybe some other moment it would be easier, but I feel like we have to talk to each other. We have to be here for each other. We have to recognize that it really is going to take all of us. But you do have to get used to you have to give up some of that kind of privacy, and you have to be ready to say, you know what, this is who I am. Doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes, but when you do, it's so rare that politicians make mistakes and admit it, but we're human, right? And so how do you say something or do something and say that, yeah, I would have done it differently or I would do it differently, and be able to have a lot of love. But what I find is, if I love my constituents, they love me back. That really, it matters. And you know, if you can establish your credibility and before you run for office, that really helps. We need more organizers who have a base and who have worked in the community and built trusted relationships before they run for office. So that running for office isn't about a personal ambition. It's about fulfilling a broader goal for society. And I'm not here because of personal ambition. I never would have run for that reason. That's not to say I'm not ambitious, let's be clear. But you have to know why you're running. And I think, you know, all of that makes it much easier to give up some of the things that you give up to get some of the things that you get.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Socio Osa. I live in Cleveland now, running a congressional campaign out there, actually. And my question for you is something that was actually touched on a bit yesterday. It's, I often see when folks of color stand up and say that they want to run, they're pushed by party officials and national officials to run in certain types of districts that look like them. And so you end up with a bunch of extremely qualified candidates all running for the exact same position in the exact same area and tearing each other down. And so I was wondering what you think we can do about that to get folks of color to run in all types of districts, whether or not that district mayor looks like you.
Well, it's really important, and it's a great question. So I would say two things. One, in terms of running in districts where there's lots of people of color. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of us live, and so that ends up being what happens. That happened in my state Senate race, and I ran against a bunch of people of color, and somebody from the API newspaper came up to me and said, oh, did you have to run against this other candidate who's API? You know, it's so hard to have two. I said, hey, we finally made it. We're just like the white people. They run against each other. It's okay. We can run against each other too. So that's one thing. But secondly, the other part of your question is really important. I actually was redistricted out of that majority-minority district. And so the district I represent now is most of Seattle, except they took almost all the people of color out of it, because most of them have been pushed out anyway in Seattle, but it doesn't include this little tiny piece of South Seattle where I used to be, and then it's got the rest of Seattle. The district is actually like 75% white, and in terms of the voting population, it was about 90% white. And when I ran, I was able to really increase the number of people of color because I ran a hell of an organizing campaign. It was not just a regular old campaign. We knocked on 170,000 doors. We made over 290,000 phone calls, and we had 1,000 volunteers. And those volunteers were active volunteers, not just like showing up once or twice. And we've continued that movement to continue to bring more folks of color into voting, but it's still a primarily white district. And I think what we need to do is run candidates who understand an intersectional agenda and really are skilled at bringing that agenda forward and speaking to it without taking away our priorities. There's nobody who doesn't know that racial justice and immigrant rights and civil rights and human rights is my passion, my work, everything I've done. But there's also nobody that doesn't know that economic justice is totally connected. They're not separate, right? And gender justice is not separate. And so if we can build a candidate pool, and we're doing a candidate training at the end of July because we've had so many people who want to run based on my experience and based on the election and everything, kind of like you. And so we're doing a training that is about being an intersectional candidate, maybe the same way you're doing today, because that really is the way you're going to run and get people of color to run in primarily white districts and still be able to win. So I think that's what we have to continue to work towards. And, you know, our agenda, when you think about it, whether you're white, black, brown, whoever you are, you want food on the table, you want a roof over your head, you want to be able to send your kid to college, you want to be able to retire with security, you want to be treated as a human. And some communities have harder time with that for different reasons, and we have to bring that up and focus not on racial equality, but racial equity, and really getting people up to the baseline. But it also means that you can fight for, like I did, just introduced with Bernie Sanders, the College for All bill into the House, free college for everybody. You can fight for that. You can fight for a $15 minimum wage, and you can fight for immigration reform, and you can speak to white folks and brown folks and black folks and LGBT folks. So it's not, you know, I think we just have to stop thinking about ourselves as limited by whichever community we come from, have represented, have the color of skin of. We really are much, much more complex than that. We just have to figure out how to express that all.